Ever feel like you do your best work when you don't even try? You know, like when you're just walking around or about to fall asleep.
It's funny how that happens, right?
Yeah, almost like if you try too hard to focus, it just backfires, especially with creative stuff.
Totally.
Well, that's kind of what David Kadavy talks about in his book, Mind Management, Not Time Management.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we're going to take a deep dive into it, see what we can learn, and more importantly, how we can use it.
Sounds good.
So the thing about this book, and we both read it and found some really interesting stuff,
Yeah.
is that it kind of flips the script on all that classic productivity advice, the whole do more, squeeze more in.
Yeah, like hustle, hustle, hustle.
Exactly. Instead, he's like, hey, if you want to be really creative, you got to understand how your mind actually works.
Right.
So it's not about apps and to-do lists. It's more about like self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly. It's about getting to know your own mind and how it works best. Because, that old school time management stuff where you're like scheduling every minute and trying to be super efficient,
Yeah.
it can actually work against you when it comes to creativity. Think about it. Can you really force yourself to have a brilliant idea just because it's on your schedule?
Oh, tell me about it. For me, it's like the best ideas hit me when I'm not even trying to think about work.
Exactly. And that's why that whole 9 to 5 thing, the typical workday structure,
Yeah.
while it might work for routine tasks, it doesn't really work for deep creative thinking.
Makes sense.
Our minds just don't operate on a straight schedule like that. We all have our peaks and valleys of energy throughout the day.
Oh, for sure.
So trying to be super creative when you're in a mental low point,
Oh, it's a recipe for disaster.
it's just not going to work. In fact, it can actually make you feel worse.
So what's the alternative? Like, how do we actually do this mind management thing? What does it even look like?
Well, Kadavy breaks it down into 3 main mental states: high focus, low focus, and restorative.
Okay, so 3 states. Let's dive into those.
Yeah. And as we're talking about each one, I want you to think about how these states show up in your own day.
Love it. So first up, high focus.
Yeah.
What does that even feel like?
Okay, so high focus is that sweet spot, right? It's that in the zone feeling. Ideas are flowing, you're super concentrated, and you feel like you can tackle anything.
Yeah.
It's that time when you're primed for the really hard stuff. Deep thinking, solving complex problems, being super creative.
Right, like that flow state everyone talks about.
Exactly.
But honestly, how much time are we really in that state?
That's where understanding your own patterns comes in. Some people, they get that energy burst in the morning. Others, it's later in the day. The key is figuring out your pattern and then using it to your advantage.
Okay, so let's say I realize I'm a morning person. My high focus time is like right when I wake up.
Mm-hmm.
So did that mean I should just schedule all my big creative projects for first thing?
Well, the idea is to match the task to the mental state, right? So if you're in high focus mode, that's when you hit the tough stuff, the
Yeah.
things that need that extra brain power.
Makes sense. All right, so what about low focus? What's that like?
Low focus is that feeling when your mind is just kind of tired. You're easily distracted, your energy's low, you don't want to deal with anything too mentally demanding.
I've all been there.
Right. It doesn't mean you're being unproductive. It just means your brain needs something different.
So instead of trying to push through and write a report or whatever, when I'm in low focus mode,
Yeah.
maybe that's the time to catch up on emails or organize my desk. Just stuff that needs to get done, but doesn't take as much mental energy.
Exactly. You're still getting things done, but you're also giving your mind a bit of a break.
Right. So it's about reframing how we look at those downtimes. Instead of feeling bad about not being super productive, we can actually use those times strategically.
You got it.
Okay, love it. Now, we've got one more mental state to go. Restorative. What does rest mean in this context?
Well, restorative is all about just disconnecting and letting your mind recharge. It's about stepping away from work completely and doing something that helps you relax and de-stress.
I like the sound of that.
So that could be taking a walk, listening to music, meditating, spending time with loved ones, maybe even a quick nap. Anything that helps you disconnect and come back refreshed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about giving your mind a chance to reset.
Okay, so we've got these 3 mental states: high focus, low focus, restorative. But it's not enough to just recognize them, right?
Right.
We have to actually use them strategically.
Exactly. It's about having the right mental tool for the right job.
I like that.
If you try to force yourself to do a high energy task when you're in a low energy state, it's just not going to work well.
Yeah, and it's going to be frustrating.
Totally.
So the big question is, how do we actually do this matching thing? Do we have to plan our whole day, around our mental state.
It doesn't have to be that strict.
Okay, good.
In fact, Kadavy actually says you shouldn't overplan because part of creativity is being spontaneous.
Right, true.
So instead of planning every minute, just start by paying attention to how your energy changes throughout the day. Like when do you feel most focused and clear?
Yeah.
And when does your mind start to wander?
And you know what? Now that you mention it, I hit a total wall every afternoon. Like I try to push through it, but it's just, ugh.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to write or brainstorm during that slump,
Right.
maybe that's when you switch to something less demanding, like emails or organizing.
That makes a lot of sense.
You're still being productive, you're just giving your mind a break.
I like it. So it's all about reframing those downtimes, right?
Totally.
Instead of seeing them as unproductive, we can use them strategically.
Exactly. And then when you hit those high energy periods, you'll be ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, there's another concept Kadavy talks about that I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
It's this idea of creative cycles.
Right.
What exactly are those, and how do they fit into this whole mind management thing?
Well, it's the idea that just like our energy levels go up and down during the day,
Yeah.
we also have these longer term cycles of creative output.
Interesting.
Sometimes you feel like ideas are just flowing, and other times it feels like pulling teeth.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I have weeks where I can write nonstop, and then I hit these stretches where I'm just like completely blank.
Exactly. Those are your creative cycles, and understanding them can be really powerful.
Powerful in what way?
Well, it can help you maximize your creative potential.
Okay, I like the sound of that. But how do we actually tap into that power? How do we use it?
Well, Kadavy suggests tracking your creative output over time. Just use a simple calendar or a journal, whatever works for you,
Okay.
and just jot down when you have those bursts of inspiration and when you hit those lulls.
Gotcha.
What you might find is that there are certain times of the month, maybe even the year, when you're naturally more creative and productive.
So instead of getting down on myself when I'm not feeling super creative,
Yeah.
maybe I use that time to plan, do research, or just rest and let my mind wander.
Exactly. And then when those creative waves hit, you're ready to ride them.
So I love that analogy. It's like we're surfers, just waiting for the perfect wave.
Totally.
This is starting to feel a lot less like trying to control every minute of the day and more like working with my natural rhythm, which I have to say is very appealing.
That's the beauty of mind management. It's all about working with your mind, not against it.
I like it. I like it a lot. But let's be real. This is a big shift from how most of us have been taught to think about productivity. So for those of us ready to try this mind management thing, where should we start? What's a good first step?
One of the simplest but most powerful things you can do is just start paying attention to your energy levels and your mental states throughout the day. You can use a notebook, a spreadsheet, even just the Notes app on your phone.
Okay.
Just jot down how you're feeling at different times.
Like if I'm feeling focused or distracted or just totally drained.
Exactly. Just those basic observations can give you amazing insights into your own mental patterns.
It's almost like we're becoming scientists of our own minds.
Totally.
You're gathering data.
And once you have that data, then you can start experimenting with different strategies, matching your tasks to your mental states.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So if I notice I'm super energized in the morning, but I hit a slump around 2 p.m., maybe that's my cue to switch to a low-focus task or even just take a break.
Exactly. You're basically creating a map of your own mental landscape.
Love that.
And that map can guide you in making better decisions about how you structure your day.
This is starting to feel less overwhelming and more like a fun challenge.
Yeah, it's about taking back control of your time and energy instead of letting them control you.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what's one thing that's really stood out to you from this conversation?
That's a good question. I think what really strikes me is this idea of giving ourselves permission to work differently. It's so easy to get caught up in that whole hustle culture mentality.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're constantly pushing and striving for more.
Always on, always grinding.
But what if there's a better way?
Yeah, what if there's a way that's actually sustainable and, ultimately more fulfilling?
That's what I think is so powerful about Kadavy's approach. He's challenging that conventional wisdom that productivity is all about cramming more into every hour.
Yeah, that.
He's saying, hey, your energy and your focus, those are valuable resources. You need to manage them wisely.
Like precious resources almost.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can be really empowering.
How so?
Because instead of feeling like you're always at the mercy of your to-do list, you can start to design your workday in a way that actually supports your creative process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it sounds a lot less stressful. to be honest.
Totally. It's about recognizing that we're not machines. We need time to rest, to recharge, and to let those unexpected moments of inspiration come through.
But let's be real. Not everyone has the luxury of completely restructuring their workday. I mean, a lot of us work in environments with pretty set schedules and demands. So how do we apply these mind management principles in a more practical way?
That's a great question. And that's where those small incremental changes can make a big difference.
Little tweaks here and there?
Yeah, exactly. Even if you can't control your overall schedule, you can still find those little pockets of time to align your tasks with your mental states.
Okay, yeah, like maybe I block off half an hour in the morning for focused work before I get bombarded with emails.
Exactly. Or maybe you schedule a walk-in meeting during that afternoon slump to get those creative juices flowing.
I like it. It's about finding those windows of opportunity to work with our energy instead of against it.
You got it. And those little tweaks, over time, they can really add up.
Yeah, they can make a big difference in how we feel and how we work.
Absolutely. And remember, this mind management thing, it's not about achieving some perfect balance or becoming some kind of productivity robot.
Right.
It's about understanding yourself and figuring out what works best for you.
And giving yourself a break when things don't go according to plan.
Exactly. Life happens, right?
Oh, yeah.
There will be days when you feel scattered or unfocused, and that's okay. It's about progress, not perfection.
Well said. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into mind management, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Your mind is your most valuable asset. Treat it with respect, nurture it, and learn to work with it, not against it.
I love that. And if these concepts resonated with you, I definitely recommend checking out David Kadavy's book. There's so much more to explore.
Absolutely. And as you go about your week, we challenge you to try some of these mind management principles. Pay attention to your energy, notice your creative cycles, and just experiment with small adjustments to your work habits.
Yeah, who knows what you might discover.
That's exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into mind management. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those minds sharp.
It's funny how it works, right? Like, we're so used to thinking about productivity as this, external thing.
Yeah, totally. Like, how much can we fit in? How efficient can we be?
Exactly. But when it comes to creativity, it's almost like we have to flip that script.
We have to go inward.
Yes. We have to look at what's happening inside our own minds.
And how can we do that? How can we practically use these mental states?
Well, you remember we talked about those three main states: high focus, low focus, and restorative.
Right.
And we've talked at, kind of what they feel like.
Yeah, and how they can show up in our day.
Exactly. So now it's about putting them to work.
Putting them to work, okay. And what does that look like?
Think of it this way. Each mental state is kind of like a different tool in a toolbox.
Okay, I like that.
And depending on the job you need to do, you're going to reach for a different tool, right?
Right. Makes sense. So if I'm trying to write a blog post, I wouldn't use a hammer.
Exactly. You'd want, maybe a laptop or,
Right.
A pen and paper.
Or if I'm trying to have like a brainstorming session,
Yeah.
I'm not going to reach for my meditation habit.
Exactly. So you're getting the idea, right?
So the key is matching the tool, the mental state, to the task at hand.
You're getting it. Now, when it comes to actually applying this,
Yeah.
again, Kadavy cautions against being too rigid with your planning.
I remember we talked about that. He's not a fan of over planning.
Right, because for him, creativity needs space to breathe. It needs some spontaneity.
Okay, I can see that.
So instead of getting bogged down in scheduling every minute,
Right.
just start noticing your energy throughout the day. When do you feel those natural bursts of focus?
Right.
When do things start to feel a little foggy?
That's interesting because, now that I think about it, I often get my best ideas when I'm doing something completely unrelated to work. Like when I'm taking a shower or going for a walk or just zoning out a bit.
That's so common, though.
It is.
I hear that from so many people. It's like when we let our minds wander,
Yeah.
that's when those unexpected connections happen.
It's like our subconscious mind is working on the problem in the background.
Exactly. So even though it might feel like you're not being productive in those moments, those are actually really important for the creative process.
So we shouldn't feel guilty about taking a break or letting our minds wander.
No way. It's part of the process. It's all connected.
Okay, that's good to know. I think a lot of us struggle with that, feeling like we always have to be on.
Yeah, but it's not sustainable in the long run.
And it probably stifles our creativity.
Exactly.
Okay, so back to this idea of matching tasks to mental states.
Right.
How do we actually make that happen in real life?
Well, One simple thing is to just keep a notepad handy.
Oh, like literally carry a notepad.
Yeah, or use the Notes app on your phone. Anything that works for you. Because the point is to be ready to capture those ideas when they come up. Even if they're not directly related to what you're working on at that moment.
So if I'm taking a shower and I suddenly get a brilliant idea for a project,
Yeah.
I pause the water, write it down.
Yes. Or, if you're out for a walk and something pops into your head, jot it down real quick.
Okay, makes sense. It's about not letting those ideas just slip away.
Exactly. Because those seemingly random thoughts can turn into amazing creative breakthroughs.
It's like we're planting little seeds and then later on,
They sprout into something amazing.
yeah, I love that. So we're paying attention to our energy. We're capturing those random ideas. What else can we do to put mind management into action?
Well, another thing you can try is experimenting with different times of day for different types of work.
Yeah.
So let's say you've noticed that you're most productive in the early morning.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the best time for focused work, the things that require a lot of concentration.
Yeah.
Then later in the day, when your energy dips a bit,
Yeah.
maybe that's when you tackle the less demanding tasks, like, emails, organizing, or things that don't need as much brain power.
So it's about being strategic with our energy
Exactly.
and giving ourselves permission to rest when we need to.
Yes, that's huge.
Because sometimes the most productive thing you can do is just step away for a bit.
Absolutely. It's like hitting the reset button on your mind.
Love it. Now, all this talk about mental states and energy cycles,
Yeah.
it's making me think about the bigger picture. How does this all tie into the way we approach our work overall?
That's a great question. And I think that's a perfect segue into...
That's part 3 of our deep dive.
Exactly, where we'll zoom out a bit and explore those bigger implications. So we've been talking about these mental states and energy cycles, and, it's making me think about how we view work as a whole.
It's like this whole mind management thing. Is it really just about getting more done? Or is there something deeper going on here?
Right, exactly. And I think what Kadavy is really getting at is this idea that we need to, fundamentally change our relationship with work.
We have to shift our perspective.
Yeah. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways from the book is this idea of, giving ourselves permission to work differently.
Permission to work differently. I like that. What does that mean for you?
Well, it's about letting go of that always-on mentality.
That hustle culture thing we were talking about.
Exactly, where we feel like we have to be constantly pushing and striving and optimizing every single minute.
Yeah, like we're always in a race against the clock.
Right. But what if, instead of trying to fit more into our day, we focused on, creating a work life that actually feels good?
Creating a work life that feels good, I love that. So it's not just about productivity, it's about well-being, too.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
That sweet spot where we can be both productive and energized.
Yeah. Where work doesn't feel like this constant drain on our energy.
That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. How can we design our work lives in a way that actually supports our creativity and well-being?
I think that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's one right answer.
Right. It's going to be different for everyone.
But I do think these mind management principles can be a really helpful guide.
I agree. It's about being more intentional and mindful about how we work.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into mind management, I want to leave our listeners with a few final thoughts.
Sounds good.
First of all, if you're feeling inspired to explore this more, I highly recommend checking out David Kadavy's book. He goes into a lot more detail about all the things we've talked about today.
Yeah, there's a ton of great stuff in there.
And as you go about your week, I encourage you to just play around with some of these ideas. Start paying attention to your energy levels.
Yeah.
Notice when you feel most focused and creative, and see if you can make even small adjustments to your work habits.
You might be surprised at what you discover. It's all about experimenting and finding what works best for you.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't about being perfect. It's about progress.
Progress over perfection, always.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into mind management. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those minds sharp.